Jalen Green goes away. You stay pretty young. You get an old veteran and 37-year-old Kevin Durant. Was Houston number one on his board, or was Miami and they shunned him?
So what we heard all along was the three teams he was most interested in were the Spurs, the Rockets, and the Heat. And then it came down to what was each team willing to give. And I think going into it, to be honest, Phoenix thought that they could shoot for the moon. They were just going to go with the highest price they could possibly get and then figure it out from there. And I think from a Rockets perspective, they knew that they were sitting on probably the best package of assets that the Suns could want, except for Minnesota, because you've got an owner that's very volatile that is committed and hell-bent to trying to win now as well as rebuild for the future, which is, as you guys know, almost impossible in terms of trying to do both. But if the Minnesota offer was truly on the table, if you could have gotten DiVincenzo and you could have gotten Rudy Gobert and you could have gotten a young wing, one of their two young wings, and a pick or two, now along with Bradley Beal and or Booker and other guys, now that Phoenix team's probably competing for a playoff spot in the West, and they get some picks. But because the Rockets control the Suns' 3 first-round picks in the odd years, this year 27 and 29. That started the conversation being that they wanted some of those back. They were trying to get some of that back. Then because they had such a good nucleus of young talent, they were interested in that as well. We had heard and early on the packages that were being put out there, I'm like, that's way too much. Like Kevin Durant, say what you want. Yeah, he's one of the greatest scorers of all time. He's 37, soon to be 37 years old. And I know he averaged more points than Jalen Green last year, but he also didn't play every game. And we know that was a dysfunctional situation in Phoenix. So it was kind of like wait it out. Then we heard the Spurs weren't interested anymore, that they were going to turn the page. They were going to look a different direction. So then it became a waiting game. Miami didn't want to give up any of their young assets. Whereas I think if you guys followed the Rockets at all last year, you saw from a Rockets perspective, yeah, they gave up 2 of their 5 starters. But Jalen Green had basically, and I don't want to say worn out his welcome, but he showed exactly who he was. And you guys know this. In sports, the unfair comparison coming out is he's compared to Kobe Bryant. Not fair at all because that's a lot of weight to put on anyone's shoulders. But he comes out with that. And then his first playoff series, after game 1 where he lays an egg, he comes out and goes, maybe the court was a little too big. Maybe the lights were a little too bright. Maybe my stomach just didn't feel right. And you're like, have you ever heard Kobe, Michael, LeBron, any guy that wants to be Batman, not Robin, or the A guy on a team? No one is saying that. Right. And then he proceeded to pull a Houdini the rest of the series, and he disappeared, except for one game. And Dylan Brooks did what he was asked to do when they brought him in, but not for $91 million. But they needed a veteran. They had to spend money. They needed a guy that could be an enforcer, show some toughness to basically a classroom full of young kids. For 2 years, he did that. He basically did not do much in the playoffs because they didn't even give him the ball. So you give up those 2 guys and the number 10 pick, which was Phoenix's, which, by the way, if you look at the number 3 pick last year, Reed Shepherd, he basically did not play.
Right.
So if you take number 10 this year and put him on the Rockets, expect to get better, maybe in 2 years, but that kid is not going to be ready to help a team that's already got enough young talent. They need someone to drive the bus. So all season long last year for 45 minutes, this team was extremely good and athletic and young and up-tempo. And in the final 3 minutes of a game, they didn't have a guy that they could give the ball to and say, go get me a bucket. They didn't have a guy that could be on the floor to say, this is how we're going to get a bucket if it's not from me. And they fell apart in the playoffs primarily because they just didn't know how to win when it was game time.
Yep.
So you add a Durant and you get better. I don't think they're done. I think that the fact that they didn't have to give up as much gets them on the right path. But now they're probably they can be potentially 30, 40 under because of the Van Vliet situation, because you can just not pick up his option. And they're talking about a much less dollar figure 3-year deal with him. But even if now the rumor out there is today, would they bring Harden back? Because Harden's a free agent. God, I hope not, but that's something that's being discussed. But they have options. And because Ime Udoka is this guy in charge that everybody seems to want to play for, they seem to have an upper hand on getting veterans that are going to want to come in and help this team.
So it sounds like, let me ask you this. Are you on the side of KD being a bus rider or a bus driver?
I think he can be both. I think he's going to drive the bus in certain situations. Now, you got a guy in Alpi Şengün who, when you give him the ball on the low post, you can say about the fact that he's got a 25-letter alphabet and there's not a whole lot of D in it. But at the same time, his footwork is very good. He can get you buckets. So you can play a two-man game with Şengün and Durant, and Durant still is capable. Now, I don't think he's going to carry this team for 48 minutes. But I think when you give the ball to a guy like Durant, because of his size advantage, because he still is such a pure shooter and he can shoot over a lot of guys, and he's a really good deep three shooter, that he can be your guy when you need a bucket. He doesn't have to be it all game. Yeah. And then the rest of their offense is basically predicated on putting the gas pedal down. Get a live ball turnover, go the other way, be athletic as hell, finish at the rim, get to the free throw line. And that's how they beat a lot of teams night in, night out in the regular season.
Yeah, no doubt.
For sure. Yeah, I obviously we need to wait the rest of the offseason to see how everything shakes out with these other teams, who's getting who. But just where things stand right now, I think I said on the show yesterday that if all things are equal, if they stay healthy, I wouldn't be shocked if the Rockets are in the Western Conference Finals at least. And I know that West is tough, but this team is really good. And I think you just did a beautiful breakdown of just what KD adds to this young team already. You got to assume that the young guys are going to get better. You bring up Reed Shepard, who didn't even play last year. That's a talented kid, though. And I mean, I would assume he's going to play this year. You know what I'm saying? So I just think it'll be better.
They have extremely high expectations for Reed Shepard. And you can't, there's only so much time you can spend in the G League if the first time he goes down and drops a 50 burger on the competition. Like, how much better are you going to get running against guys that you're better than? He needs to be on the floor to understand. And I stood next to him on the floor last year, and I literally thought I was standing next to a prepubescent kid that's about to enter high school. Like, he hasn't filled out. He hasn't put on any muscle. He can shoot, he can jump, but in this league going up against grown-ass men, if you can't put your big boy pants on and play physical, then there's no spot on the floor for you. So they got two young guys that have the basketball ability to make this team better, but how they adapt is going to be key. Shepard has to do what I said. Cam Whitmore might be one of the most talented guys that could hardly touch the floor last year because of what's between his ears. Here's a kid that he grew up in the AAU system, fed with a silver spoon. Everywhere he goes, give him the ball, get out of the way. Plays 1 year at Villanova, comes out and says it's supposed to be a lottery pick, but already the word starts traveling. Doesn't take coaching well. Doesn't like to not be the man with the ball. Shows up on an NBA floor and realizes I'm no longer the best player on the floor, but still expects that I should get the ball. I should not have to play defense. Ime Udoka doesn't play that. So they sent him down a couple times, tried to get him his head right. Came back and had a 27-point game in one game. Next game, he starts doing the same stuff. They sit him down. He doesn't understand. He's pouting. They don't have time for it. If this kid could figure it out between his ears, you got to look. Every team in the league wanted him in one of these trades, the Kevin Durant trade, because it's not about basketball ability, fellas. It's about the fact that you got to figure it out between your ears. And at a certain point, the clock's going to stop ticking because teams don't have patience for that.
What about the Thompson kid is legit too, huh?
Oh man.
Yeah, now he's a kid that I thought was so raw offensively that it was going to be tough to find a spot for him on the floor. He just earned it by flat out playing defense at a level that not many in this league can play. And then when you find out he can finish, but then the more important thing, and you guys know this, some guys just don't love ball. He loves the game to where the story was last year, he and his brother wanted to work out every day. They shut down their gym that they were working out in. They went out on the asphalt and they were on the blacktop working out. And I'm sure the GMs are going, what are we doing with the knees and everything? But he can't stop thinking ball. So he's worked on his shot. He doesn't have a three-point shot per se, but he's working on it. But the kid works his tail off. He's got an unbelievable body and a really strong ticker to go after everything.
Athletic too, crazy athlete.
Oh my God. And yeah, exactly. When you talk about his reach at his size with his ability to guard just about every position on the floor, and he's got that kind of edge to him where we saw it a couple times last year. You're going to fool around and find out that if you push his buttons and thinking, oh, he's a little slim in the frame, he's still going to knock you on your ass.
Right.
So they love what he brings. He was, if there's one guy, and we had Jalen Green conversation and Şengün and all these guys. If there was one guy in my mind that was untradeable last year, it was Amen Thompson.
Well, based on what you're saying, sound like you're saying they might win a championship next season.
No,
I didn't want to say it, but
no. Don't misconstrue. I'm with you. Did they get better? Absolutely. But is Denver going to get better and be better? Absolutely. Yeah. Is the team that won it in the West? Absolutely. Is Minnesota going away? No. So to me, yes, you're going to win a playoff series this year because you didn't get out of the first round this year with Golden State. Does that mean that you're going to win a chip? No. Does that mean, like, I'm with you, they may get to the West, but they are not, in my mind, that's a big, they have more work to do this offseason if they want to get to that level.
That's what I was going to ask. That's why I thought Miami was probably number one on his list, because the East is wide open with Halliburton and Tatum out and Dame out with Achilles, and don't know what's going to happen in New York with Giannis, and wherever he goes, whatever happens. The East to me made sense for him. That's why I thought Pat Riley saying, nah, we're going to pump our brakes on a 37-year-old and not give up what we wanted to give up. That's what I thought happened there. Do you think he would have preferred Miami because of the East, a little easier path?
So I think that might be the only, obviously everybody wants to play in Miami, but the thing to me would have been Miami had to part with young pieces they weren't willing to part with. But Kevin Durant is a kind of guy with the guys that they already had from a veteran perspective, to your point, that could allow them to compete and go further in the East, because you have Tyler Hero, because you have the big fella that can play versatility and guard the high post. You've got some young guys that are coming into their own, but you have to play with a New York team that's starting five is loaded. Now, Boston seems to be blowing it up. And today, the report is that Drew Holiday's already been traded. He's out. They're trying to trade more than that to cut salary. So Boston's run might be already over. You're right. With everything else that you mentioned, yeah. I mean, if they make this move, you've got to give to get. And if you gave up a little, some of your young pieces to add Kevin Durant to Bam and Tyler and the guys that they have, that team should have been able to compete. Cleveland, again, I don't want to sleep on Cleveland because they're talented, but they got to prove they can get over the hump. Spoelstra has been there and done that. Riley knows what it takes. I was a little surprised they weren't more competitive.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing from. Yeah, I've seen some guys, NBA guys, talk about the same thing you just mentioned. Like, man, I would have been all in on the guy in the East as it is probably the easier path. You got Cleveland, New York. We don't know. They're a good team, but obviously they're missing something. Yeah. And we'll see. It's going to be interesting.